This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are back here in the studio. We actually are getting ready to head out for our Eastern tour here. So we will be visiting New York, Washington, D.C., down through the Eastern Coast. So if you've got an interesting innovator that you think has a great story to tell, we'd love to hear about it, and maybe even stop by with the mobile studio. So just drop us a note, drop it over at phil@killerinnovations.com. And we'll see if we can't get that scheduled. For some of you that have been longtime listeners, one of our shows, which was Finn Gourmet Food, which was lovely, Paducah, Kentucky, at 16-degree temperature, was definitely one of the more lively experiences of talking to innovators in rural America. But the response from that show and some of our other the shows that we've been doing from the road have become so popular that we're actually going to be expanding it this year. So again, we're heading out on the East Coast tour here. If you've got an interesting story, podcast, interest, something that would fit well with the show, we'd love to hear about it. Again, drop me a note at phil@killerinnovations.com. And yes, we will be at the Consumer Electronics Show this year with the mobile studio. We always set up right across from Central Hall. If you are going to be there and you would like to pitch, or you know a guest that we should consider having on the show and you want to pitch it to us, again, just drop me a note and we'll get that all set up. So let's talk about today's show. We actually have a very interesting guest who also has a little bit of lineage back to HP. So we're not going to get into an HP biased string of guests, but I thought that this guest had some interesting perspectives, particularly around innovation inside of larger organizations. And how do you get the innovation actually through the process, or as I say, sausage making, and how do you actually make it real? So today's guest is Catherine Radaka. Catherine is founder of Rapid Learning Cycles Institute. She's got a book coming out October 1st called High Velocity Innovation. So first off, Catherine, thanks for coming on today's show.
All right, thank you. Glad to be here.
So one of the things we were talking about before we started the show was around the challenges of innovation inside of larger organizations. You were at HP, I was at HP. Albeit we didn't overlap. You actually were, well, I guess you were a little bit, but you were in...
About a couple of years, yeah.
By a couple of years.
Completely different areas.
Totally, completely different areas. But the challenge inside of an organization, such as... inside of HP, who everybody thinks of as like, well, why did I have to create the Innovation Program Office? Doesn't HP naturally just highly innovative? And I'm like, well, every organization faces the challenge. It really also doesn't matter whether you're big or large. But part of the challenge, and I think you've kind of put the finger on the pulse of the problem, though, is around how do you create and do that within those large organizations. Before we jump in, though, albeit I shared it, you're from HP, but give us a little bit more background on you. Introduce yourself to the guests of the show.
Okay. So as you mentioned, I was at Hewlett-Packard and started my career there, really. I had a few other jobs before that, but I really feel like I got my feet underneath me in the innovation space when I joined HP. And a key part of that was the time I spent at the eServices Inside Lab, which was a corporate group sponsored directly by Carly Fiorina and her executive team, to help drive the strategy of eServices, which were you can think of them as an early form of the API frameworks that drive things like Zapier and If This Then That, those kinds of tools. And the difficulties we had with actually doing anything with the discoveries we were making in that area, because there wasn't a lot of pull from the business for these kinds of things. They were being told they needed to do it. They were being told that e-services were a key part of the strategy. But when it came time to actually make the connection between the work that we were doing in the labs and the things that they needed in order to deliver on e-services, say for the printing business, those connections were very difficult to make and ended up with that group being very short-lived and not really generating much value for HP for the time all the hard work we put into it. And I got very frustrated with that. I'm a kind of person, I like to see my ideas go out into the world. I like to see my visions for the products that I'm working on realized out there. And so I ended up going back to the printer division and working there basically to help programs in the printer group. While I was there in 2004, we brought in a person from the University of Michigan, a guy named Dr. Alan Ward, who had done research into the product development practices at Toyota. And I got very interested in that. It seemed to go very well with work that I had done in the Agile space. And I ended up eventually leaving HP in 2005 to basically take Alan's work out into the world and get it. And Alan had died tragically in an accident in 2004. And so I decided I wanted to carry on his legacy. And so from about 2005 to about 2010, if you'd asked me what I was doing, I would say I'm a lean product development consultant, kind of in the lineage of Alan Ward. And then I realized that, again, that frustration of, oh, we're doing all this stuff and it's not really generating the results we're looking for, and really digging in and saying, why is that? Why are these things not working? And then in 2010, about 2012, I had the opportunity to work with 4 companies simultaneously. Those companies were Whirlpool and Steelcase in the United States, and Novozymes and Novo Nordisk in Denmark. Novozymes is biotech and Novo Nordisk is a pharmaceutical company. And they all approached me basically with the same problem, which is the fuzzy front end is difficult. We're not getting the results we want from that. We're having difficulty moving our innovations into the business. Can we use some ideas from Lean and Agile to help with that? And as I went around from company to company, kind of during that time, we would run an experiment in one of the businesses and then see how that worked and then improve on it in the next business. And by the end of that time, we had all converged on what we call the Rapid Learning Cycles Framework, which is at the center of high velocity innovation. And since about 2012, that's what I've been doing. And I've been doing it because it works. I've been doing it because when we go into companies and we are able to generate pull for innovation, by the processes and tools and putting the right people in the room. And then, as we begin to generate that pull for innovation, it creates new strategic opportunities for the companies, and it helps them, figure out where they can expand into new markets. And so it's been a really, really good thing for those companies. And the book High Velocity Innovation tells the stories of some of those companies.
So the challenge is, within inside any kind of a large organization, is this challenge of, what I refer to as the catching of the innovation, right? So, when I've been out talking to large organizations, in fact, I've just been doing a bunch of pro bono work for the U.S. Marine Corps at Quantico on how do you innovate the U.S. government. And part of it is you got people who are really creative, right? And you got teams that are doing some great stuff, but it's how do you align with the catching side of the organization that actually turns into it and makes it real? I guess in your case, you really talk about it as creating the pull for the innovation.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what we need to do, not just in a large organization, but any organization that wants to be innovative, is there's got to be pull for that innovation that starts at the strategic level. It's got to be important to the company. So, for example, I was visiting a company, Gallagher. Gallagher is based in New Zealand, and they have the strategic imperative of relentless innovation. And because they have that strategic imperative, the entire organization, from the people that you would think of as innovators, kind of running things like innovation teams, all the way through to the people responsible for putting these products into production, they all understand the need for innovation. They all understand its importance to the company. And they all understand why it's important that they contribute to that. And so what that does is it creates pull for the ideas that may start in, say, a lab setting or an innovation setting, all the way through to execution. That makes the execution go a lot easier.
Well, I think in some of those kinds of organizations which have tried to put innovation as kind of a cornerstone or a foundational piece to their overall existence, you still, though, inside of an organization, even when they have that as kind of as a mission, you still run into what I call the innovation antibodies, right? Mm-hmm. Whether the CFO with the financial constraints, like, love to do that project, but we don't have $2 billion of cash laying around, or the general counsel can't do that. There's legal restrictions, those kinds of things. So, have you seen that yourself? Because I think a lot of people have this perception that you can just create a highly innovative organization where everybody's an innovator, right? But you have some people who are the highly creative innovation type. You've got the execution side, and you have certain corporate roles where people are responsible to manage things like risk and those kinds of things. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Catherine Radica and talking about high velocity innovation, the work that went into her new book coming out October 1st. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This is Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back to Killer Innovations. Let's pick up our conversation with Catherine Radica, talking about the work that went into her new book, High Velocity Innovation, coming October 1st. Now, Catherine, when we went to commercial break, one of the things you kind of touched on, but we didn't get a chance really to get into, is around metrics. And organizations and leaders always want to be able to measure. And there's been the historical, and I've probably done 10 shows on this throughout the 15-year history of the show on metrics. And it always turns out to be a very popular show. And that is because innovation sometimes gets viewed as almost this black art. You can't measure it, right? Which I continuously say is bogus. You can measure it, but be careful of the metrics you put in place because you can have unintended consequences. So share with us your thoughts on how you think about metrics and what are some of those metrics that you found successful to use.
Okay. So first of all, your audience is probably aware we want to distinguish between process metrics and results metrics. So process metrics for innovation are going to be around things like how much time is your team actually spending on innovation activities versus maintaining the current business? How much are they spending on innovation versus the current business? What tends to happen is that current business needs, of urgent customer requests or a factory going down, tend to pull resources away from innovation. And so by measuring that, you can get a sense of, is the organization really investing what it intends to invest in innovation, as opposed to having those things get sidetracked. And then for results innovations, you want to be looking at things like the percent of revenue that's coming from your innovation programs over time. Now, innovation programs do have a longer time scale for a return on investment than say an incremental product development program does, where you understand everything about it. So it needs to be general and not tied to a specific program. If all of your innovation programs are succeeding, then you're probably not being innovative enough or taking on enough risk. And so the metric, so that metric kind of accounts for that because you're looking at it at a portfolio view instead of looking at it as a program by program view. And then you want to also be looking at things, like, how is it impacting the bottom line of your company? How much of your growth can you attribute to these innovation programs? How much of your profit can you attribute to these innovation programs? And really trying to ensure that is a growing piece. With the companies that I mentioned, like Gallagher, those are the kinds of things that they measure to ensure that they are actually living into their strategy of innovation. And by breaking those metrics down, division by division, or that helps hold your senior leaders accountable for ensuring that innovation is getting done inside their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've always intrigued me on the metrics piece, right, is people want to try to fit the innovation metrics into how they normally measure stuff, right? It's because you have to have the information in order to measure it, right? So whether it's time reporting or output, measuring output or whatever. But yet one of the challenges is even on the output, what you refer to as results, looking at the portfolio, part of the challenges is the lag time from the time an innovation decision gets made until it's going to have some form of a meaningful impact, right? People want, what can you do for me this quarter, right? It's the quarterly drive problem. of how does innovation have an impact. And one of the things that, that I have found intriguing, we had a guest on, I don't know, this has got to be 3 or 4 years ago, who runs a mutual fund that only invests in companies that have high innovation impact.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got his own set of metrics, and he looks at things like how much does a company invest in training,
Mm-hmm.
right? As a good indication. If a company is not spending on training, then your skilled workforce is going to start becoming aged out from the standpoint of not aged out from an age like a biological age, but just from an age out of expertise and the new
exactly.
new
The world is
technologies.
just moving too fast not to develop your people. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting that, there are all of these surrounding metrics, which can be, you can call them weak signals, leading indicators, whatever, on whether or not an organization is going to have meaningful innovation impact.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on that? Have you seen some of those activities in your clients?
So I definitely have. And one of the things I'll say, of course, is the title of my book is High Velocity Innovation. And the focus of my work over the last 15 years have been about helping companies get their ideas to market faster. And one of the advantages of getting products to market faster is that those lagging indicators aren't so lagging anymore, right? Is that when you have the ability to go from idea to launch in 2 years, then it starts to make sense, it starts to blend better with the rest of the corporate expectations, right? Around financial performance, especially for delivering innovation. So acceleration is one way to deal with this problem, trying to, ensure that you've eliminated the roadblocks to speed so that the investment that you make in time and resources early on has a payback that is fast enough for the organization to realize the impact from it. And the good thing about, so we've been talking about generating pull. And the thing is that when an innovation program is actually able to say, we contributed X to the bottom line of the company this year, then creates a much stronger pull for innovation. And I think that innovation programs suffer a lot when people have the belief that they don't need to measure their time. They don't need to worry about how long it takes their innovation. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be messy and ugly. And they're right. It is. But it doesn't. But a lot of the messiness and ugliness is kind of self-created and stuff that we can actually do something about. So I can't predict when a scientific discovery will occur, but I can make sure that I have enough bets in enough places that I'm likely to have something. And I can also ensure that once I have made that discovery, that I've eliminated all the obstacles in the way of getting that out and commercializing it. And so that's what we work with. The company featured in the book. That's what they've done in order to help address that problem.
Are you of the belief, though, that the length of time of what you classify as high velocity varies by industry? So some industries, like building laptops, it's basically 10 months from the time you come up with the idea until the laptop's on the shelf. Same thing for a printer, those kinds of things. Versus
and then there's
pharmaceutical or heavy manufacturing.
Exactly, and then there's seasonality effects. Like there are only certain market windows when you can put innovations into the market, and your consumers are there to pay attention. I mean, so all of those things are absolutely true. What we want to do is, and I have also worked in some areas that have very notoriously long lead times for innovation, such as pharma. And what we want to do in that space is to ensure that we're not putting roadblocks in our own way. So in pharma, for example, the failure rate in clinical trials is notoriously bad. And the clinical trials are expensive and they take a long time. So when we're working with pharma companies, what we're working on is how can we ensure that if it's going to fail, that it fails long before it reaches the clinical trial phase.
Perfect. So we got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll pick up this conversation really talking about how to do that fail fast piece, because that's key to not having the distraction factor in the entire flow for the innovation. So we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. We'll continue our conversation with Catherine Radica, and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's continue our conversation with Catherine Radica, talking about her book, High Velocity Innovation, but really the research that led up to what is in her book. We were talking as we went to commercial break, talking about failing fast. And I am a big believer of, get a lot of projects up and running. Obviously, you have to qualify those in some ways, but it's one of those, trust but verify. You trust the idea, but you verify to make sure that it's making some level of progress. And you need to have some form of criteria to say, hey, this one's not going to make it, and free up those resources to put onto the next idea to keep the funnel fresh and to make sure that you don't overcommit resources to a project that's just never going to make it, to the end goal line. So share with us your thoughts, because I know you've seen a lot of your clients and you've been engaged in this for quite some time, about how good, how bad, and what's the best way to deal with failing fast.
Mm-hmm. So I think every innovation program needs an escalating series of hurdles that an idea has to pass through in order to get to the next level of funding. That's driven by what the organization needs to know next in order to make that level of investment. So when something's just an idea, those barriers should be fairly low. And okay, this seems like there's some potential here, because you don't want to have criteria that are so strict that they screen out ideas that just need a little bit more maturation time. And at the same time, when you get into starting to do things like build supply chains or invest in long lead time parts, those barriers should be fairly high. And it works best for the teams if those hurdles kind of step up. If they are gradually increasing and relatively short in duration. Another common mistake that I see companies make that slows down innovation is having too long between these hurdles. So the program might go a year. Well, a year's like way too long for an innovation team. They can come back. God only knows where they've been in that year and what they've come up with. And so we recommend having these escalating hurdles on the order of at least once a quarter. What that encourages teams to do is to find fast, quick ways to validate whether or not their ideas are indeed good ideas, to really challenge their assumptions on that, because they know that in a couple months I'm going to have to get in front of the executive team or my leadership team, and I'm going to have to explain why I think we should go forward, what we've learned, what we intend to learn in the next phase that's going to again encourage us to go further. And so these very frequent check-ins and getting feedback from management is one really essential way to help teams. If they're going to fail, they'll fail fast because they will be incentivized to learn fast. A second thing that we do is we make sure that every group understands what their core hypothesis is when they have an idea. And so this core hypothesis is an idea kind of comes out of the work of Eric Ries and Steve Blank. And it's the idea that every product on the market is a hypothesis. You believe, something leads you to believe that if I give this technology to these customers in this way, I'm going to create this business value for my business. All right. There's a lot of assumptions embedded in there, and most companies never check those assumptions. So as part of that process of the escalating hurdles, we coach our clients to ensure that the elements of that core hypothesis get early validation. If an idea is going to fail, it often is because something in that core hypothesis isn't right. Some assumption's not true. So we have them check those assumptions early.
Yeah, I'm sitting here having flashbacks on doing early proof of concept trials in the field for what we call market validation. And you think it's a really great idea until 9 out of 11 people tell you it's a pile of crap, and go back to the drawing board and try all over again.
Yeah.
But the important thing is also to remind ourselves that we are not the proxy for the customer, right?
That's right.
You think inside your organization, you're within an industry, you're serving a certain customer. At HP, yes, I use laptops. Yes, I use printers. So therefore, I should design one for me. Nope. If I design one for me, I'm designing one for the 37,000 engineers inside of HP. Or if I'm in the cable industry, I watch cable TV. So therefore, I should know. I can tell the designers what the channel guide should look like, or how the user interface. And guess what? We're not the proxy for the marketplace.
That's right. I worked with a playground equipment company, and even their children played with playground equipment differently because their parents worked at a company that made playground equipment. So they couldn't even be designed for their own children. And of course, there's another challenge too, though, which is that when you're doing something truly visionary, a lot of times customers can't really tell you what they want. And so when we're thinking about validating our ideas in the space, that's one thing that we have to think about is, what test can I design that's going to validate that my observations about this market are true even if the customer can't give me direct feedback to say, yes, I want this.
Well, and it falls right into the whole challenge of customers never really being a good source of the ideas for those real breakthroughs. And so you do have to apply, some level of forecasting as to what the customer may need, and then actually tell the story so that the customer can see themselves in that story. And that's what I refer to as strategic storytelling. Because otherwise, they're standing here. You've got something so far out in the future they can't even rationalize why they would need it. But the story I always tell is my mom. My mom would never have been the customer to say, "Design me a microwave." But once she saw the microwave, she bought one of the early microwaves right out of the bed because it saved her 30, 45 minutes, standing over a stove, and she wasn't into being over the stove. She wanted to be doing other things. And so she immediately got the time savings.
We're seeing this a lot with IoT programs right now. The Internet of Things, the idea of putting sensors and internet connectivity into devices that have not had them before. And it's really hard for consumers to say, why do I need to have connectivity in my washing machine? What would I do with it? Right?
I think the funnier one is the toothbrush. Right? Yeah. Does your toothbrush now tattle on you to your dentist, to your dental hygienist? Yeah. You go in for the cleaning and they go, are you doing it regularly? Oh yeah, twice a day. No, that's not what your toothbrush is telling me,
Exactly. Yes. And so you have to ask yourself, is really the real consumer, the insurance company there? And so anyway, but that's part of the thing is like, okay, so you need to be visionary and say, okay, we're going to put this internet connectivity in this toothbrush because actually it is kind of good for your dentist to know how effectively you're cleaning your teeth, or maybe, or for you to maybe get some real time coaching from the company about, the areas of the mouth that you're getting and not getting, right? But a consumer is never going to tell you they want that. But what you can do is you can say, okay, for this use case that I've developed for this product, that is a use case that was not even possible until these technological advances that we've had. What is the consumer benefit? What is and is that benefit something that they care about? How are they getting that benefit met today? And to begin to try to get at that, try to find those compelling use cases that are going to drive the adoption of that technology.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? I've been involved in podcasting since the very early days, right? Well, Gimlet Media, one of the big podcast producers, produces a podcast called Chompers, and it's aimed at kids. And it's a daily episode, 2 minutes long, for your kids to listen while they're brushing their teeth, right? So it's an alternative way to deal, right? Just to say that there's never, don't get enamored with the idea that there's a single path to the solution. There's a variety of different paths, and looking at things that are not logical, right? You think like, how, I listen to podcasts. My grandkids, in my case, don't listen to podcasts. Well, they do. They listen to Chompers. My grandkids love Chompers. Play it so they can brush their teeth, and they brush. And the rule is they got to brush the entire 2 minutes while they're listening to the show. But there are all these alternative ways. So the one of the things I wanted to talk to you about a little bit, we talked about this really briefly. We've only got a really short period of time. We may carry this over into the next segment. Is what is your thoughts on the role of different national governments? You're in New Zealand now. You spent a fair amount of time there. I've spent time in New Zealand working with Callaghan Group, which is the innovation group within the New Zealand government, helping businesses in New Zealand. Done a lot of work in the U.S. government. I've been doing a bunch of work in Europe and in other countries around the world, Canada, etc., looking at what is the role of government to either encourage or discourage innovation. So we're going to pause right here. We're going to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, Catherine, I'd really like to get your thoughts on, do you see a role that either governments can encourage or in some cases discourage innovation? And what should they think about from the standpoint? We do have a number of regulators and government officials who listen to this show. This might be an opportunity to get a little bit on the soapbox and maybe change some people's thinking. For instance, I know the Callaghan Group listens to this podcast quite regularly. So when we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Catherine Radica. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Welcome back. Hey, Catherine, we were talking at the break about, or at least I was posing the question, and I gave you the commercial break to think about it here a little bit around what is the role of either encouraging or discouraging innovation? Because I've seen it vary so much. I do a lot of work here in the U.S., Canada, Europe. I've been doing a bunch of work with Callaghan in New Zealand. I worked with the Australian government. I worked with Beijing. And it varies widely. What's been your experience of where governments can either encourage or discourage, and what should they be thinking about?
So it all goes back again to generating pull. And just funding innovation, just providing grants and things, that's kind of a push. It's a push because you're pushing money onto a company. They don't really know, a lot of them, what they're going to do with it. A lot of that money ends up going to waste. But there are ways that government agencies can create pull for innovation. And one of the key things that they can do is just make sure that they're providing lots of opportunities for companies to connect with each other, even generating a little bit of healthy competition around innovation by giving them lots of opportunities to talk about their innovation, especially in peer groups that don't have competitors, so that they feel safe talking about the real stuff they're working on and not just the stuff their PR departments will allow them to talk about, right? and getting together and really networking. So Callaghan Innovation is another group that I've also had some work with in here in New Zealand. And I think that one of the really good things that they do is that when they do provide funding for innovation, there's a lot of accountability to go with it, that they ensure that the groups are actually getting their regular reviews, there's technical milestones that they need to be hitting, that there's that it's not money that's just being pushed in a grant form and come back to us in a year, that there's more direct engagement than that. And I think that that's if you're going to give a grant to an organization, the money's helpful, but it's not going to be nearly as helpful as the accountability that you provide to say, yes, we're giving you this money and the expectation that you're going to be doing it, to be innovative. So let's talk about specifically what that means. And then let's get together every quarter and talk about what, how well you're doing against that. Again, it comes back to the accountability that creates the pull.
Yeah. And one of the things I found with Callaghan, though, correct me if I'm wrong, though, at least, I've hosted a number of companies that were very active with Callaghan in New Zealand. They've come to the U.S. They stop by for a visit or whatever. Is that Callaghan also helps connect them with the markets. So it isn't just drop the money and coach you and mentor you, but they actually get to the other side to actually help try to create what you would call, I guess, pull.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And helping to connect, especially the smaller businesses to markets that they wouldn't easily have access to on their own, helping them connect with, people in related industries. Mm-hmm. Again, sometimes small companies have difficulty getting some of the big guys to pay attention to them. And that's something that a government agency can help with, is say, we've got this company that we want to help connect and make sure that those connections happen.
Yeah, that I get all the time. Everybody wants the magic Rolodex to crack the code at HP or somebody else, right? They'll want the introductions to the big guys. Mm-hmm. As we wrap up the show, one of the questions I always like to ask people about is what are you curious about now? I mean, you've been involved with a lot of industries. You've got I know what it's like to be an author. You get on the other side of the book's about to launch. You're kind of taking a little bit of a pause breath, right? What are you curious about now? What's kind of piquing your curiosity?
So the thing that I heard over and over again when I interviewed the companies for the book is how the high velocity innovation practices had given them confidence to invest in riskier ideas, in more out there ideas, because they had the confidence that they had a working process for screening those ideas and getting them out. And so that is really, I think, going to be my next area of focus, is talking about, now that you have this increased confidence, what are you going to do with it? And looking at things like platforms and product families and how that fits into innovation. People often think about the first product. What happens after that?
Yeah, exactly. And that tends to, you got to be careful about not becoming overconfident, right? So, past performance is not a predictor of future success, right? So it's also about, making sure that you don't overreach at the same time. But, taking risk and risk management is an area that's underappreciated, I guess. understood when it comes to innovation, I guess. And
that's the thing that they've said over and over again, is that they now knew how to take an idea that would be way too risky for them in the past and figure out how to manage that risk by eliminating the uncertainty. And because they knew that they had strong relations with their business partners downstream, they knew if it came up with something, they could commercialize it. And that gave them the confidence to push the boundaries of their technologies even further.
Perfect. So, hey, Catherine, I want to extend my appreciation for you taking the time. I know it's a crazy hour in New Zealand for you to connect in to be part of today's show, so I greatly appreciate that. If the listeners want to keep track of what you're up to, what's the best place for where they can follow you?
The best place is highvelocityinnovation.com.
And we will have that URL over on the show notes, so make sure you hop over there, killerinnovations.com. And we'll have Catherine's contact information over there so that you can find her. And also check out the book, High Velocity Innovation. It's coming, it'll be launched October 1st, so you want to check that out. Find that. I'm assuming we can get that anywhere, Amazon. Anywhere the book publishers are all.
If you go to highvelocityinnovation.com, you'll see an icon to the book. You click on that, it'll take you to a place where you can order it anywhere you want to.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Catherine. Really, really appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thank you very much.
So as we wrap up today's show, keep in mind we are doing the East Coast tours I mentioned earlier, so drop us a note. If you do have a great innovation story, or you know somebody who has a great innovation story that would make a great guest on Killer Innovations, drop me a note over at phil@killerinnovations.com. As we wrap up this show, as you know, we're on season 15. And we do this as a paying forward to basically pay back my early mentor, who told me I could not pay back all the work and investment he made in my career, and that I needed to pay it forward. And that's what was the impetus of starting the podcast back in 2005. The one thing I would ask, though, is that you get out there and share the podcast. Give us a rating over on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. That helps us get on the radar screen for new listeners to find about the show. And let us know what you think. Post those reviews. We read those regularly, the small team here that's come alongside to help us with the podcast. So we look for that feedback, how we make the show better, and what we can do to give you content that you find useful on your innovation journey. With that, we do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule this week to listen to the show. We'll be back next week. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.